Përshëndetje motra.
Music in the Art and the Trime podcast.
I'm Leonarda.
I'm Lejla.
Welcome home.
Leo, since we started this podcast, we've taken part in some really exciting events, interviews, and most recently we have been asked to be a part of a study that's been conducted by a PhD student at Oxford University. And the study centres around the Balkan migrant women's lived experience and idealisation on marriage and gendered heteronormative roles, and in particular exploring like how the dowry, so the Çejz, has an effect, or if it has an effect and impact on marriages. And so it inspired me because I was thinking about it the other day and I thought it's such a deep topic to discuss, how I guess the culture of weddings and marriage is for us as Albanians. Because when I sat down to take part of the research and I was being interviewed, it was really emotional for me because some of the questions was like, what have you got from your Çejz? And I had to explain, like, I never had a Çejz.
Yeah.
I got shunned, so I don't have a Çejz. And it made me realize, like, oh my god, like that is such a big part of our culture, of our wedding 100%. Culture, of our marriages, in our community. To me, I you know me, like I love our weddings. I love how colourful our weddings are, but I don't have that lived experience of being with an Albanian man. Yeah. So I thought it's only right that you take over in this episode.
Yes, thank you, Lejla, Dauti.
For the long introduction. We got there in the end.
No, absolutely not. No, I was really excited to do this episode because it's no secret. I'm married an Albanian man. It's a big topic. It controls a lot of our culture, our traditions. And it sets a lot of expectations, specifically on women, within our culture and gendered
roles, expectations behind it. Yeah.
And today we're gonna unpack it.
Yeah. We're gonna dive deep. Are you ready? Deep. Are you steady?
I thought what is the best way to talk about marriages is really to take it back to what marriages were in the Albanian
and you kind of have to, don't you? I think in order to understand the state of play today, it's just like Torska said in one of the last episodes, we do have to take it back, and we do have to look at what the traditions and the cultural expectations were, you know, back in the day. And you know, I'm talking about taking it back to like the canon times, even earlier, maybe like in the Illyrian times, where marriage was it was a power play. It wasn't really a love play. And we still see that up until maybe before the World War I or II, depending on which village you came from. So all the marriages within the Albanian community back in the day, and when I say Albanian community, I mean like old Albania. I mean pre-Yugoslavia, probably in the Ottoman era, where marriages were conducted by the elders, by the two elders of each family, were conducted and organised, agreed upon that when this girl turns 16, she's going to marry your son. That's so when they're of 17.
Age, and it was all done based on the word besa. You know what besa is? It's, you know, when you give your word.
It's an oath,
it's an oath. It's still used today. My parents still use it. My dad comes from a very, very traditional family. He still uses it. I've only used besa maybe twice in my entire life because I was raised with how important actually taking that oath and giving that promise to someone is, and you shouldn't break it. The whole process of the marriages, you get married at 16, then the Çejz comes. The Çejz is to prepare the Nusa, the bride, for her life with her husband. Yeah, the Çejz was organised, and I understand why it was organised, because we're talking about villages, we're talking about mountain people. There is no technology. There is, you know, we have to think about textiles that weren't so widely available, and Albania was in the perfect Mediterranean. It had trade, so it was also a competition of what you could get your bride as a Çejz. So the best linen, bed linen, curtains, silk pillows, and then came the gold. And the gold was seen as something of value that you give to the bride and she gets to keep it, but she has to wear it in every function. So that's just how it worked. And we brought the Çejz and we brought the gold with us in today's modern world, and we've kind of turned it into this modern day thing. But the Çejz, in some context, the way I understand it, helped a lot of brides to actually start the way they would start
their life with their
their husbands. But in terms of gender roles, it was as you would expect. The woman it was expected of her to leave the house, her parents' house, say goodbye, darlings, and then
goodbye, darlings. Goodbye, darlings. I love that. Goodbye, darlings.
That's so posh. My siblings would be like, Leah, you're so posh, in the comments. And she would go to her husband's family and she would move into the in-laws' house. And she was expected to basically look after her husband, everyone in the house, cook, clean, and it was expected that she would bear children quickly because she had to make heirs, and sons were favoured. We know this. Nothing's changed.
We've spoken plentiful about this.
Yeah, nothing's changed. Just as in the ways of the.
How it was back then.
Then. It's still the same. Like, sons are favoured because sons will carry the lineage and sons will be there to fight battles and to fight blood feuds. Like, there's a reality. And the woman would raise the children. She was in charge of raising the children. She was in charge of making sure that everyone was fine. There was no time for her. It was just, this is your life now. Yeah. And she also had to ask permission to go and see her own family. Yeah. She could not leave. And it was expected that now she's got new parents. Not in a sense that her parents are replaced, but that she's got a duty over her husband's parents.
Set of parents to look after.
Whereas the husband is expected to go out, hunt, provide, do all the financial responsibility. He had all the financial responsibility. But I think one thing that is unfortunate is that a lot of brides of that day, even though they were responsible for raising their children, they were also blamed if something didn't go well in the raising. So, whatever it was, language, or whether they married the wrong person, or whatever decision, or however they spoke to the dad or treated the dad's side, it was blamed on the wife because she was there, she was always there, and she was the caretaker and caregiver. So I think it kind of already sets that precedent that a lot of women, even though the Çejz and the gold and it kind of softens everything, it wasn't a love. It was more like, this is my duty. Like, I have to do this as a woman. And then again, also the men. But the men are always having it easier than the women. Yeah. We know that.
We know that. I think we said that a lot on this podcast too.
Exactly. And, I think, if a man helped in those days inside the house, he would be laughed at.
Yeah, I guess because it was such a feminine role, wasn't it? The caretaking, the caregiving, the bearing children was such a feminine role. And it's, as you're explaining all of this, because I know it's absolutely no secret. Things definitely have progressed. Yeah. Like, arranged marriages aren't practiced this way in our community now.
No.
I'm not saying never anymore. I'm just saying not like how it was before.
No.
And it's really important to be clear on that. But I look at, like, for example, my mum's generation, and they were still practicing arranged marriages. My mum's in her 60s now. And actually my parents did have a love marriage. And when my mum wanted to get married and they wanted my mum's side of the family were like up in arms, like, absolutely not. What do you mean? Like, you're supposed to have an arranged marriage. We're supposed to pick the man you're going to marry. And I think my mum probably was ready to run away. I don't know what happened. at the time, I remember, because my grandma raised her children all on her own. She was very much a Bornish, and she stood up to the rest of the community, to the rest of the men, the elders, and was like, no, actually, I want to try. She can posh. She can marry who she wants, and I will vouch.
Yeah.
She was like, I will vouch for
Yeah.
my daughter. Like, my daughter can marry who she wants, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
Huge deal at that time.
100%.
Like, I was born in 89 and my parents got married a few years before I was born. But yeah, I say that to say that this was what I witnessed, you know, growing up in Kosovo before coming over here to the UK, was my mum did all of this. You know, she got married and went to my dad's home, and she was looking after everyone.
Yeah.
The in-laws, my grandparents, my dad, the siblings, my dad's siblings.
Yeah.
She was now in charge of caregiving for this whole household and homemaking.
Yeah, and it's not too dissimilar from my own parents. My parents, they met, you know, they have a love marriage, and my doya, he's not with us anymore, but he threw a fit. He was like, absolutely not. This is not going to happen. I am not marrying one of my sisters off to my dad. And my granddad worked in France and Germany, so he didn't live consistently in Kosovo, so he was the head of the household. He was the only boy. I only have one boy, and the pure fact was that my dad's family were really, really dirt poor, like so poor that they didn't even have food to eat. And most of them had to leave. Most of them had to go to Sweden, America, and all these places. But my granddad came into the picture and he was like, no. He was like, my dad and my granddad, the way my parents tell me, is they had such a special bond. So he liked my dad and he paid for the dorsum, he paid for everything, for the cheers, or everything. My granddad, my mum's dad did everything for her. Like your mum, she was the caretaker. She miscarried because she was so busy cleaning on tiles with her first baby until I came along, and she was looking after everyone, and no one was looking after her until my granddad stepped in and was like, nope, bed rest, adult crew. And then as toddlers, you know, we left. But it's that, and it carries on. It carries on into the diaspora. It doesn't stop just because you're not in Kosovo. It carries on because that's all you know. You don't know anything else. And I grew up with a nan that said to my mum, like, shui must fall, like ibur, like shui must fall, must tanizonin. You know, this is not your house anymore. You are at your husband's. And I said to myself, okay, but what do widows do that have lost their husband and their husband's family take everything from her, take her kids and tell her, go back to your family? And her own family was like, no, because you're used goods. So where is she left?
Yeah, exactly. What does she do? No children, no place to call home, really. And is now seen as like a spinster, essentially. No one wants her because she's divorced. Yeah,
exactly. And it's, you know, that is a taboo still today, because, you know, if you were around maybe during the Ottoman era, it wouldn't have been such a taboo because it was so Islamically ruled, and that doesn't exist. But it's such a taboo, and it still is today.
I mean, obviously, I get marriages have definitely evolved up until the present day. I mean, even like our lives with our partners, like if I'm talking about my mum's, for example, my parents' marriage, compared to what my expectations are in a relationship now, I mean, like, they're polar opposites.
100%.
They're polar opposites.
Yeah.
And the same with you and your husband.
Yeah.
Somewhere that progression happened.
We're still stuck. I think we're still stuck because we're stuck. So we feel stuck because we're in the diaspora. So we're exposed to a capsulized tradition. And that's why we feel stuck, because we're not progressive like what you see maybe in Kosovo. What you see in Kosovo is, you know, the younger generation, and I only say this from experience from my own cousins, the younger generation, you know, they get excited to get married. They look out for love. They they want to start a family, they want to create a family because they want to. But there's...
Well, yeah, because as a community in our culture, like, we are very family orientated.
Exactly.
And I think it's one of the most beautiful things about us. Like, we're
Exactly.
not individualists. We are very much collectivists.
Yeah.
And the thought of having a family, having children is very, it's not even something that's like revered. It's just, it's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
And we all believe, and I think that a lot of us in our community believe that wholeheartedly.
100%.
We're so family orientated.
100%. But also in Kosovo, they, you know, most parents don't have to worry about their kids marrying outside of the culture.
Yeah, because they're all they're all from the culture.
Like, please tell me, like,
that's why when she asked me, when she said, "Have you got any items from your Çejz?" I was like. But do you know what's funny? Because it never actually occurred to me. I never even had that thought of myself that I actually never had a Çejz.
Yeah, and it's so sad.
Like, I never gave myself that opportunity to sit down and be like, oh my God, I never actually had that.
Yeah.
The complete opposite experience. And when she was asking me those questions about what do you bring, I was like, I don't have anything of that side of my heritage.
Yeah.
And weddings in our culture are huge. It's such a big event in our lives.
Huge.
And when I was asked that question, I was really felt really vulnerable because I was like, I never got to experience that.
You feel robbed. You feel robbed to an extent because we're brought up in this expectation that this is what an Albanian marriage is. This
the idealization.
The fantasy.
Yeah.
The fantasy.
So I think maybe you're right. Maybe what I was feeling is I had this ideal in my head of what it would be and how it would make me feel.
Yeah.
And I feel like I never got it. And I feel like I was robbed of it.
Yeah.
But it was just, it's an idealization.
Yeah.
It wasn't, none of it was like actually real. Like, it hadn't happened. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't my reality.
No. And also, it's not like, so I think it's because I have the same experience as you. Well, it's not the same, but I didn't get Çejz either. And for me, it was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like,
because it's such a big part of our culture. Yeah.
It's just like I just ran with the punches, and this was because I hadn't, like I said, I wasn't reborn yet into my feminist energy, because that would never run today. But like, I just was so naive, and the pressure of getting married, the pressure of finding someone, the pressure of, my parents were so worried that I was going to marry outside of the culture, because of just how independent I was getting, the fact that I was going to Vienna to study, the fact that I was going on holiday with my friends, and all my friends weren't Albanian. I don't have any Albanian friends, and I was so open with my parents. I had more guy friends than girlfriends, so it was, for them, it was.
I bet that gave them an aneurysm.
Leonarda, när kan jag ta för? Literally, Leonarda. My mum would always be like, what she can? Vet se ona se kom kryskolen, mos me noche trifu fakulteta sotti kry. So man was it there. And I was like, oh mama D. Mama, I know. But they were so worried. So by the age of 17, my dad was getting proposals left, right and centre. My aunts were literally spreading my pictures. And I said to my mum, no, you're. And it just intensified when I went into university. It just intensified so much. And now looking back, in a way, I understand their fear. I understand as immigrants, you don't want your child to stray from this path that you believe is right. But with the same breath, when you leave Kosovo, you need to understand where you're going. You have to understand that there are different cultures. And I wish more of our community understood that, instead of demonizing. And it's a double standard, because they demonize the women rather than having it fairly between the men and women. And I'm not saying we should do fairly, because I don't believe in this Albanian, we have to stick within the lineage, because we're humans at the end of the day. None of us are any different to each other. But they got so worried, and they just set me up with so many men, boys, not even men.
And 17, we're still children.
Yeah, 17, 18.
And I think we need to remember that as well, that when marriages are happening at such a young age, we're literally still children.
Yeah. We are still children. We don't know jack shit. I did not know anything when I was 20.
And like expecting to then have to fall into this huge expectation, both men and women, men to be the provider and women to be, you know, the caregiver and the caretaker at home.
Yeah.
They're huge gendered expectations, gendered roles.
Massively.
To fulfill at such a young age.
Massively.
Like, I only feel like I can fulfill certain roles now and I'm 35.
Same.
Like, even when I think about when I had Bella 10 years ago, I was not ready and I was 25. No way, you're not stable enough financially or mentally or emotionally to just go into a marriage at such a young age. Well, I believe, this is what I believe.
No, same.
At such a young age, and then just to live this like heteronormative life.
Yeah, especially in our community. I mean, I'm 31 and I still think if I got pregnant today, I'd feel like a teen pregnancy. Like, what am I doing? Like,
I feel like when I
put me on Teen Moms.
Yeah, like, I look back now. I genuinely, that's how I feel. Like, I feel like I was a teen mum. I was 25.
No, but in our community. So the way. So I will go through how I was raised as the oldest, even though we've covered this, but this is more to deal with marriages and expectations of marriages. My mum would, because all teenagers are lazy, so, you know, all teenagers like to sit around and stuff, and I was very focused on university and like school and getting all the good grades, and at the same time looking after my siblings. But let's say I wouldn't do something, like I wouldn't hoover or I wouldn't help her with something, you know, that it would be like, oh, when you go to your husband, how are you going to do this? Oh, when you go to your mother-in-law, how, like, you're gonna bring shame to me. They're gonna say, look at, you know, how has Leo's mum raised her? How has Leo's dad raised her? Oh, you know, like my mum always says, so it's like, you know, like, how are you gonna talk to your in-laws like this?
Say on the podcast.
So you've already built this. By the time you're in your late teens, early 20s, you already kind of have an idea of what you're expecting. And you don't know how to feel about it because you don't know any different. So you think, actually, this is my duty as a wife. I have to cook, I have to clean, I have to work, I have to share my income, I have to bear babies, and at the same time, I have to call my mother-in-law mum. And I was not prepared for any of it. I was not prepared for the change that was going to happen within me and the life that I've got now. Because when I was 19, I met my husband. We got engaged. I met him on Monday. We got engaged on Friday. And the reason, let me tell you why.
Let me tell you something.
So yeah, it was like we met on Monday and we got engaged on Friday.
That's really fast. Why did it happen so fast?
So it happened so fast because I just got sick and tired. I got sick and tired of all the pressure. I got sick and tired of all the pressure. I love my husband. I love him so much. But if I went back, there is no way on God's good earth that I would ever get engaged that fast.
Yeah.
But I got sick and tired of the pressure. I'm going to Vienna. I'm finishing I was in uni. My whole thing was not like, oh, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have kids and blah, blah, blah. But I met my husband and he was the first man that I had ever met in our community that didn't comment on my physical appearance. He was very like, he knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
And he didn't say stupid shit like, oh, why don't you get your teeth fixed? Oh, like, you're a bit curvy, you're a bit too curvy for me. Oh, like, can you stand up for me? I want to see, like, trust me, I've heard all of it. I want to see your whole body. And that's a turn off. If you guys are saying that, if anyone is saying that to women, whether you are straight, lesbian, whatever, don't. Just don't.
It's just not the person.
It's just not it.
Ugh.
And, you know, he then continued. He then pursued me and we spoke. And then my dad being, you know, he's, you know, we have such a good connection, and I'm the oldest, and he was, so protective, and he's still so protective over all of his daughters. He came up to me and was like, "What are your intentions?"
What to
Like,
you?
yeah, and I was like, "Bub,
Your dad?
Bub, why are you asking me?" He was like, "No, what are your plans?" I was like, "Bub, I don't know what my plan is for tomorrow, let alone my life." And he was just like, "Look, I just don't want you to I don't want you to go back to England and, it just kind of be wishy-washy. Like, I want you to try and make a decision." And I just felt more pressure, because up until then, I had that summer alone, I was on 5 dates.
Right, okay.
And I was just
that's a
like,
lot.
I was like, more like,
No comparison between, I guess, like your experience of, getting engaged and getting married is just so different to mine.
Yeah, and it's so fast.
So hugely different to mine.
Yeah, it's so different because there's so much cultural complexities. But anyways, I messaged my husband. I was like, "Look, I'm not here to play games. Do you want to get engaged?" And he was like, "As long as you're sure, like, I'm in it. I'm in it for the long run."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Don't break my heart." And, we're good.
Yeah.
But I was very like, I don't know I don't know where I had all that courage to literally just be like, boom, 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 boom. This is what I want. This is what I don't want. You like it. You don't. I don't care.
Did you never feel like, I don't actually fully know this man?
Yeah, in
I've
the
only
beginning,
known him like for a few days, but it's such a big decision to make. After knowing someone for less than a week.
Yeah. In the beginning, I was just like, what did I do? What did I do? And then I was like, what if it doesn't work out? Like, the cultural pressure of like, no, you can't break it. You can't do this. You can't do that. But I think my intuition of my husband and my gut feeling of my husband was correct. Because from day one to up until last night, and going forwards, inshallah, I've never felt anything but like love and butterflies. And when we're going into our 11th year of relationship, so alhamdulillah. So it's just I think the pressures, but also making sure that my gut feeling is correct, and then just to try and get everyone to just fucking leave me alone. I just jumped at it.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Because I guess like once I left my home, my parents' home, I didn't have that pressure, that cultural pressure.
No.
I didn't have that wider community like breathing down my neck. Oh my God, you're 25, you're not married yet. Oh my God, this, that. I never had that, so I didn't have that to worry. I mean, I had other worries, don't get me wrong. I had other worries. And that's the thing that's still really important for Albanian women who aren't married to Albanian men or to men. Maybe they're queer and they date other genders. That it's still complex. Regardless of how your relationship functions, that the intersection of our identities, and I will repeat myself until I'm blue in the face, the intersection of our identities being an Albanian woman is still complex when it comes to relationships and how we navigate in the world. So whilst I didn't have those pressures, my pressures were completely different.
Yeah, of course.
And I think like it's just so important to explore what it was like for you.
Yeah, well, it was stressful because then I had the pressure of finish university, get a job and get his spouse visa, and then there was a whole ordeal with like all the legalities of it, and going back 3-4 times a year and making sure that our feelings were still there, because the last thing I wanted, I felt so scared of, let's say, saying that I didn't have feelings. How would I go to my parents? Because my parents of that time are not the same parents. Like now, I know that they would welcome me, but at that time, I just didn't feel like I had anywhere to turn to in terms of... The
mentality was probably a bit different.
Yeah, the mentality was different. I had no one to talk to about anything, no one to help me about anything. I had to become basically this lawyer and run after like all these things, whereas my peers were all traveling the world and having fun and stuff, and I was here. I came literally before summer. I was unengaged and just this normal year. After I came back to uni, everyone was just like, did you have a forced marriage? I was
Oh my God.
like,
Do you know what?
I was like,
And
no.
that always is one of my biggest bugbearers is that there is a big misconception
Yeah.
and misunderstanding of the difference between a forced marriage
Yeah.
and
Arranged.
like an
Yeah.
arranged marriage and a love marriage. That always really bugs me. Like I think
Yeah.
that's something that probably we'll just have to explore in another episode. But it is true. I
Yeah.
think a lot of Western people are
Yeah.
like, oh my God, it's a forced
Yeah.
marriage. No, it's not. They're two completely different things.
100%, no. But anyways, we got engaged on Jummah. We got engaged on a Friday, on a blessed day. And we had our engagement in Garmi. I loved it. My dad brought out his camera. I've still got all the pictures. I've got a whole album. Thanks, Home Office. But I
have to prove it to them.
But I've got like, I bought like a whole set for our engagement, marriage, and then anniversary. And we picked out our our engagement bands. Now in Kosovo, it's much more popular just to get a band and a yellow gold band. And I was like, hell no. I was like, I'm not getting nothing yellow, because I just don't like yellow gold. The only yellow gold that I will wear is like my lir and this that I got from my in-laws. That's it. Like I just won't. And I got it. I was like, we'll get a white band, but I didn't want a white band. I wanted a diamond. But the expectation wasn't that. So I was like, okay, cool. Like vazhdojmë. And then we changed our rings, and I just got this, and that was it. And then I was just like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
And I just didn't get like any of the gifts, any of the stuff. And I almost felt this energy of like expectation, because because I'm literally outside from Kosovo, and I was raised outside of Kosovo, that there was this expectation that I don't deserve to receive anything, and I should be the one giving everything. And I was like, when hell freezes over, that will fucking happen.
What made you feel like that was the expectation? It's just the body language and attitude, and just like seeing everyone around you, especially the ones in Kosovo, like my cousins in Kosovo, getting all of these things, and then me did not. And I was just like, what? Yeah.
Like why am I not getting it? I married an Albanian. Like, why? It was like a ticking time bomb in my head, because I, like, throughout my whole childhood, throughout everything, I was not the one to serve anyone. I just wasn't. I always fought against these like cultural expectations. So it's just like, it was a ticking time bomb, and my husband knew, because I laid everything flat out for him. I was like, this is what I will and will not do. I will not be calling my in-laws mum and dad. It will never happen. I've got one mum and dad that God has given me, and that's it. It's just not going to happen, because I will not replace my parents with anyone else. That's your parents, and I respect and love them for giving birth to you, but that's it. And a lot of like hizmet, I never did hizmet, and I still will not do hizmet. I don't care. Unless it's my own house and my parents' house, then yes. If not, then no. I will not go to someone else's house and do hizmet. And just like I refused anyone calling me Nusa. We're talking about 11 years ago. No. Leonarda, that's it.
Where do you think this resistance, this like sense of rebellion came from in you to not take on that expectation as a Nusa?
Yeah, I think it was purely from the first experience of, hold on a second, I'm not getting what I was promised. So then no one's getting what they were promised.
So it was like a rebellion because you didn't, they didn't meet your expectations, and you were like, fuck this, I'm not meeting yours then.
Yeah. And also it just opened up my eyes a bit more to, why are women doing these things? Why am I doing this?
That's such a good point, actually, yeah.
Like, why am I coming from my cushy room and safe room, coming to your house and serving you? Do I look
look?
Do I look like I was born literally like a minute ago? No. So it was just, why? I was I was
really resistant
really
to this expectation.
And my husband already knew that I was not going to do it. Once I went to my uncle's house, and this was from my mum's side, and my uncle's aunt said to me, "Oh, get up and make your husband coffee." And I was like, "This is your house, not mine. Make it yourself." And that was it. And she never asked me again. So I've built up this expectation, and now everyone knows who Leo is. Now everyone knows that if they even direct a word of nuse to me, they just know. No, but they've seen my look. They've seen my look, and I've told them straight up, do not call me that. My name's Leonarda, Mustafa, or Demolli, whichever one you want to use. But it's Leonarda. That's my God-given name. So, it started off rocky because a lot of people didn't understand why. Because a lot of people felt entitled to me. They felt entitled to, we've brought in a nuse. A dowry or a meher is paid at the beginning of a marriage. It's in your marriage contract.
Right, okay.
It's when you go to the imam and you sign your marriage contract, they will ask, what is your meher?
How does that differ then, that version of a dowry, how does that differ to a Çejz?
Because the meher, the woman has all the right in the world to ask for whatever she wants. There is no standard.
Right.
In the Arab world, and I'm talking about like Saudi Arabia, like really rich areas of the Arab world, meher goes minimum like 100k cash to the woman. And yeah. And that is her money. Men during the time of the creation of Islam were marrying and divorcing women left, right and centre. So then the rule came, you have to pay meher. And if you don't have money to pay meher, then tough luck, you're not getting married. And that was it.
Okay.
And that was it. That was literally the prerequisite of you getting married as a man. You have to have meher. And whatever the woman chooses as meher, that is what she gets. So I didn't get the cheers. I didn't get gold. I was like, cool, I'm getting my meher. And I asked my husband, I want to go to Hajj in this lifetime, whenever. So I want to do the pilgrimage with him and 10k cash. I gave him no like deadline, so he can do it, bit by bit. And if I want to, I can put interest on it, but I'm not that mean. But
100% interest.
But he agreed to it. To it. We put it in our contract, and that was it. And that's all I wanted. And then when I got married, when we did the Konurzem, there was no wedding, there was no anything. And I got pissed off because I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean there is no wedding? So then and that blew it like all for me. And my husband was scared. He got so scared of me. Because he was just like, I'm scared what you're going to do. Yeah. And that's where he learned that he needs to... That's where we both learned where we need to just set boundaries. Yeah. Boundaries between families.
So how would you say then the roles in your marriage have progressed? Because obviously why I'm focusing on your marriage is, again, because you're the one who's actually married in the culture.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
Yeah.
So how are the roles in your marriage progressed and differed to, for example, from like back when our parents were married and the roles that they fulfilled?
Yeah, I think the main thing is my husband, he shares his life with me. I mean, he shares his jokes, he shares his comedy, he shares the videos he loves, he shares his friendships with me, he shares his whole life with me. He shares the ugly, he shares the nice, he shares the loving. I've seen his angry side, of course. We've been married 10 years going to 11. So he shares all of that with me, which is something I don't see a lot. Because I see more like this hierarchy. We don't have a hierarchy in my house. There is no such thing as hierarchy. If there was a hierarchy, I'd be top. Facts.
Period. There was a hierarchy, we'd be at the top.
But there is no hierarchy. We don't have cleaning expectations there is no like cleaning expectation. There is more like, you are an adult, I'm an adult, we will clean together and we will spend time together and we will help each other. We will listen to each other, we will support each other, and we will hold each other when we're upset. In my marriage, I'm the one that always goes to him to speak and to talk and stuff, and he's more of a like reserved kind of person until he, you know, can't take it anymore, and then he comes to me and, you know, we talk about it, and, you know, he always says to me, "You're right, you're always right, I'm so mad, I'm so annoyed, you're always right." So the way I explain my relationship is I married my best friend. I didn't marry just any man. I married my best friend. And when you marry your best friend, that's your best friend for the life. And, you know...
And you treat each other as such.
Yeah.
Like, when you marry your best friend, you treat each other as though you are best friends.
We have fun together.
Yeah.
When we see each other, we smile at each other. We dance, literally, at the entrance. Like, if I'm dancing, he'll dance with me. Like, we just have fun. And it's interesting because when people see us and they see how we are, they always ask us, like, how are you so happy? And we just say, because one of us, God forbid, could die tomorrow, or life is so short. Why are we so concentrated on stuff that do not need attention?
Well, because so essentially the Çejz did have a big impact on you, and I guess like the role that you were like, no, I'm not doing that now. So, but it clearly didn't impact your marriage and your relationship.
No.
But it did impact the way that you resisted and rebelled against the lack of Çejz kind of.
Yeah.
Brought that out, triggered that? I guess.
It did. And I think my husband, he felt really bad about it. And because he felt really bad about it, he will never say no to me. It might sound a bit entitled, but I'm not a high maintenance kind of girl. Like our finances and everything, we do everything together. But he will always put me before he puts himself. And he just doesn't. If I want something, he will work hard to get it for me. Even in Kosovo, like, he had a maybe €300 a month job. He spent 6 months to get me like a Swarovski necklace. So it's just like, he will work hard to get me something that I want, or he, you know, because he knows that I will never spend it on myself. Like, he just knows. So you know, that's the kind of husband I wanted. I wanted a husband that notices the small things, not just a husband that buys me like €10,000 worth of gold or the chair. Like, that's it. Now you have to cook and clean for me, because it feels like a transaction. And our marriage has never felt like a transaction. And in a way, I'm happy that I didn't get Çejz, because.
So I was thinking as you were talking. And I know this is neither here nor there, because it hasn't happened. It didn't happen. The fact is the complete opposite happened. But do you think it would have been different if you did have a Çejz?
Yeah. If
you did have the dowry, do you think you would have felt more like indebted to then actually fulfill that
100%
gendered role, that Nusa expectation?
100%, because they would have had to go into debt to get however. But I don't. I'm glad I don't. I'm glad I don't feel like I've got a debt to them. You know, my husband, he bought me the whole Daloma set for my husband's. He bought me the whole Daloma set for my brother's wedding, and I got that all custom made. It was expensive, so I will count these things as my Çejz. Like, I count, you know, small things that he gets me as Çejz.
Well, essentially, because the relationship you have between you, the two of you, is the most important one, regardless of whether you got the Çejz from your in-laws or whatever.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Like, you can have a Çejz. Okay, brilliant. And as I said in the beginning, I think it's a beautiful part that we a tradition that we practice. It definitely has these. It has complexities tied to it, because a dowry essentially is a transaction.
Yeah, it is a transaction. And
so you can't take away from the fact that I think it's a beautiful part of our culture, but it is a transaction.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. The same mental thought. It's a transaction because you've got all this gold, you've got all these dresses. So when you are the dowry, so you have 5 dresses. You normally have all these dresses that you have to wear as a bride of that family to their family's weddings for whatever, and they have to constantly buy new dresses for you. And then you've got like 3-4 different dalom and demia, and then you've got your vençanit, which is your bridal gown, and then you've got all the gold that on Bayram, for example, I've got family members from my dad's side that I went to Bayram Eid a few years ago that literally wore head to toe a demia, so much gold, and she was pregnant 8 months. And I was like, what are you doing? She was like, oh, it's tradition. I was like, says who? Oh, this is how we do it. So you have to do it. You feel, you are expected to do it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it almost feels like your in-laws have done you a favour, and because they've done you a favour,
I guess how it's spun as well. A lot of it is spun around the idealization, around that fantasy, around getting all that Çejz and that gold and all of the nice dresses. That it's like, oh my God, I'm so grateful they did that for me. Now I have to fulfill this part of my role as
Exactly. And unfortunately, in some cases where, let's say, for example, you do have freedom as a bride in your husband's family, and you can build a career, and then the Çejz is even more beautiful because it hasn't stopped you. Yeah. But a lot of women,
it hasn't been a control tactic. Yeah.
But on the flip side, a lot of women that I know, it has been a control tactic. It has been like, well, give me your ducat and everything. I'll lock it up in our bedroom because it's safe with us. It's our property. And that's just how it's used. It's never, and I get it. I get it from a family's perspective that they've got all this pressure to make sure that they've got thousands and thousands of euros worth of Çejz. I get it. But at the same time,
a huge pressure. That's the thing. You're so right. It's a massive, massive pressure because this tradition that we practice is expected from almost every single wedding that you go to. Yeah. And you go and you spectate the Çejz.
Yeah,
like as if it's a museum.
Exactly.
And it's a huge pressure. Yeah. It's massive pressure. You're right. 100%.
Huge pressure. And which family can do it better and what not. But that loses the whole value of what a marriage is. And that's why I've always said it's this fantasy, it's this transaction. You're actually losing the whole point of a marriage, and you're making it like you're selling and buying horses and cattle, whatever it is. When Çejz it should be a beautiful thing, and no one should be judged for getting, maybe a small Çejz or a big Çejz or whatever, but it also should not be used as control. As a final thought for this episode. Is that too cheesy?
Final thought. Look at us.
Is that cheesy?
6 months into it and we're into final thoughts, everything.
Is that cheesy?
A final thought to round off this episode.
I'm happy we spoke about marriages because it's such a big, huge part of our culture. And the Çejz triggered my rebellion in my whole marriage. But the positive side of it is I'm who I am now. I am this feminist. I have, alhamdulillah, a happy marriage. I don't need any of that. All I need is my husband. And
basically saying that it wasn't the be all and end all whether you got the Çejz or not, whether you got all that dowry, because the fact that the reality is that it's you and your husband that have to live together.
Exactly.
It's you and your husband that have to have that partnership going forward, regardless of how much gold and how much demia and how many dresses you got.
Yeah. And also you are allowed to make your own rules in your own home.
Oh my God, absolutely.
So, and that's, we can't lose notice of that. You can make your own rules with your own husband. Do not let social pressures, do not let expectations, do not let anything pressure you. If you and your husband have an understanding, you love each other, you love your relationship, you love your life, that's all that matters.